All right, hello and welcome to another Expert Inside interview. My name is John Golden from SalesPOP, online sales magazine and Pipeline or CRM, joining you as usual from a sunny San Diego. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Daryl Black, who is in Alberta, Canada. How are you doing, Daryl?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. And Daryl is on a mission to eliminate toxic leadership. And who doesn't want that? With 30 years of crisis-tested leadership and a decade managing large-scale, high-budget projects, Daryl's top 10 LinkedIn leadership coach, top 5. Sought-after speaker and author, has guided thousands of executives across North America, Middle East, Australia, New Zealand. And you have an Order to Chaos framework. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today is, you know, how do you get from micromanaging leaders who micromanage and like are always down in the weeds and details, but aren't really, aren't able to create the strategic visions or execute the strategic visions because they're so down in the weeds. So, first of all, Daryl, why is it that leaders, I mean, you go into a leadership position because you want to make a difference, because you want to, have a vision, you want to strategize, you want to do all these things. And yet most leaders default into then micromanaging. How does that happen?
Oh my goodness, Pandora's box. So first, before I even jump too far into it, I just want to commend you for your work in spreading the word and the awesome work with your podcast, et cetera, et cetera. So I know it's not easy. So kudos to you right off the hop here.
Thank you.
Well, micromanagement, there are myriad of reasons around it. One of the things that occurs, with leadership in general, I think a lot of times folks are actually forced to take a leadership or management position. And what do I mean by that? Well, we actually compensate folks for their level in the organization rather than necessarily their contribution to the organization. So if you're faced with a management decision or to go into management, if you want to make more money, you want more holidays, if you want, more authority and all those other things, you kind of are like, if I really want to supply or provide for my family and have nicer vacations, a nicer car and all that stuff, I kind of like, shoot, you know what? Yeah, I got to kind of take it and I'll just figure it out as I go. And then with that comes now what got you here won't get you there.
Right.
What I mean by that is we tend to promote folks that have a really good technical expertise around something. So that could be building widgets, it could be sales, it could be coding, it could be any of those kinds of things. So we reward that, and rightfully so. And then we put you into a leadership position. And by the way, John, congratulations on your promotion. You've got 8 people that you're looking after now. You're amazing at coding and all. I trust you. You'll do a great job. Oh, about extra training. We're not able to do that. You'll figure it out. And my door's always open, John. So come in and see me. And then when John, you come in to see me, I'm like, hey, you know what? You're a smart dude. You'll figure it out. Just get her done. There's YouTube and all that other stuff.
Yeah. And Daryl, and it's really interesting, isn't it? Because there are management principles that are kind of universal, right? They're not taught to most people. Most people kind of learn them by themselves or just come across them. Then, as you said, there's not just the managing piece. We also say, hey, go coach your people too. That's part of your job as a leader. You have no idea how to coach. You've never been trained in how to coach. The last time you probably experienced coaching was, high school or something. And you think, okay, so I just kind of tell them what I think they should do, and then they do it, and we're all good, right? Which isn't coaching. So they go into this job missing 2 fundamental skills.
Yeah, and I have to tell you too, a lot of what happens is we are a reflection of how we were brought up,
sure,
in the organization. So one of 2 things happens. We either think to ourselves, hey, you know what, that John's a great leader. I'm going to try to emulate that without knowing all the inner workings of how that works. Or more commonly, I do not want to be that person. So I'm not going to do that. And so then you don't really know where you're going. And so you end up with what I call scar tissue learning. You know what doesn't work, and then you're just ping-ponging along and hoping that you find your way. And you need to realize as quickly as possible that you're in the people business. It doesn't matter that you're building widgets or sales or engineering or any of that. Once you start to elevate through the organization, you're dealing with people. And previous guests, I think, have even said this, and It's like, my job would be great, except for the people part.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
hard. And that's the part that we don't know about.
Yeah, and Daryl, because I used to do that when I was running some organizations, and I, had to talk to people, or even when I was like in leadership positions, and people would come in and they want to talk about their career. We have done too. I mean, it's unfortunate we have set things up where there's really only one career path for most people, perception wise, and that's you move up from you're task orientated, and then you get to lead a team of people doing that task, right? And that's it. That's your career path. It's always moving up in management. We don't do enough work on finding career paths for people who are really good, but maybe won't make good managers or are going to be better at what they do. So we already set this up from the get-go. This is your only form of promotion. And then when people come in to talk to me, they'd say exactly that. Like, what do you want to do? Oh, what I want to manage people. And I'd be like, why? Why do you want to do that? Can I just enlighten you as to what that entails? And, I would tell them, I'd say, you're part parent, you're part psychiatrist, you're part punching bag, you're there's so many different elements to it, and you have to be prepared for that. But we don't prepare people.
No, and then we layer on a healthy dose of stress that goes along with increased profile, pressure, all of those other things. And then neurologically, I spend a lot of time in neuroscience of leadership and motivation and things like that. And when we're under stress, what happens? We actually want control. We lapse into what we know. And what do we know? We know about building widgets. We know about engineering. We know about coding. We know about all those other things. And so when we actually need the aperture to widen to deal with myriad of different problems and deal with the humans that we're interacting with day to day, well, stress actually causes us to focus in on it. And then we're losing all of the data. We're losing the ability to be empathetic, which is a word that we didn't use 10 years ago in leadership. That was not empathy, vulnerability, compassion, kindness, all of those things that those quote unquote old school paradigms we were brought up in. That's what we need is the empathy. We need the compassion. We need the kindness in our workplaces today.
But Daryl, on that note too, I think I agree with you, and things have changed a lot. But also on that is, people are now saying, you're a leader now. You need to be empathetic. You need to be vulnerable. You need to be all these things. And you're like, okay, but how do I do? I don't even understand that. What does vulnerable mean? I mean, what do I just start pouring out my heart to people? Who wants to hear that? Who wants their, you know what I mean? So we have these kind of things, and they're very important, but we still don't define them. We don't explain them. We don't help people get there. So then we leave it up to their imagination. And unfortunately, we've seen like the pendulum swing to a crazy side where, you have people who are sharing everything and trying to be like friends with their employee, and you're going, no, you're missing the point.
Yeah, that is so true. Well, okay, I read a book. I have to be more vulnerable. So I come in Monday morning. Hey, folks, my dog died. I cried all night. My wife and I really fought. My kid is actually a disaster. You know what I mean? There's that oversharing for sure. And one of the things I think that we have to be mindful of, or maybe a good place for us to start, because vulnerability can be difficult. It's a balance. But the word empathy that I used a bit earlier, that is something I think that we can latch on to much more simply than we can say vulnerability. And what I mean by empathy is more specifically cognitive empathy. And that, John, is essentially just putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. It's perspective taking. And we don't even have to agree with them. You come to me with a certain issue or challenge. If I'm truly being empathetic, all I have to do is look at the data and just, look at you and say, okay, I get it. Maybe coming from a different industry, different company, or whatever that might look like. And then just having the wherewithal to say, okay, I don't have to agree or disagree. But in order to connect with individuals, I will sit and I will actively listen. But if you don't have that empathy, you're not going to be sitting there listening to the person, because you're going to be judging the heck out of them. You're going to be reading your email. You're not actually going to care. And that will quickly become apparent. And I think we've all been there.
Yeah, and I think and it's a good point you raised. And I think the important point is sometimes people confuse empathy with sympathy, right? And that's, they think oh, I put myself in your shoes and then I sympathize with you. No, I put myself in your shoes, and if there's something to be encouraged, I encourage it. I say, go. If there's something that needs a little addressing, you address it. It's not, they're not the same. So sympathy and empathy are not the same. And it doesn't mean, and empathy doesn't absolve you from difficult conversations. In fact, it should encourage it.
I would agree. And we talk about difficult conversations, and one of the reasons we micromanage is because we're actually unable to have some of those conversations. We'd rather just do it ourselves. You know what?
Yeah.
We want to avoid, we want to look the other way, avoid that conflict. And it's easier. Let's face it, it's easier just to frickin' do it sometimes than have that quote unquote difficult conversations. But the conversations are only difficult because we make them difficult.
Yeah.
But we have an obligation, moral obligation, ethical obligation to ensure that folks at our workplace feel heard, feel listened to, seen, all of those other things. Now, as you said, it's about a spectrum, right? We can't listen to everybody all the time and their all opinions 24/7, all of that stuff. But there are certainly parameters and frameworks that we can put into place that will allow people to be heard and to be seen. And yet you still have the ability to lead your team and deliver outcomes. And it's a fine balance. And it's a balance that I've spent 3 decades, kind of, navigating and fairly successfully.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point as well, is that I think it's a lot about also setting the expectations with your team, with your company, whatever it is, and say, open to ideas, open to open communication, but there's also times when we need to execute and we need to move, and there are times when we'll disagree, and that's okay too. As long as you can get on board with the final decision. And like I used to say to people is, listen, if you ask me a straight question, I'll give you a straight answer if I know the answer. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't know the answer. And if I'm prohibited from giving you the answer, compliance or privacy or whatever, I'll tell you that too. So anytime you can come and ask me a question, you'll get one of 3 answers. You'll either get, here's the answer, unvarnished truth, or you'll get, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that, I can find it out, or you'll get, I'm sorry, that's not information I can share with you.
Well, and I appreciate that, because one of the reasons we micromanage is we don't create autonomous, high-performing teams. We're not intentional about it. And with that comes the expectations. And so the first step, one of the things I do, I was in Jasper last summer, National Park, wildfire for 5 weeks. My summers are spent and dedicated to emergency management and crisis leadership and golf, frankly, if I can. But then the rest of the time, non-summer, I'm doing my leadership coaching and all those things. So I'm very much a practitioner. And I would have teams rotate in and out about every 7 to 10 days, give or take, and not just a whole team, but it'd be, a staggered kind of approach. And I would have a very standardized order of chaos, team building kind of process or steps. And the first one is, I would tell folks that ships don't sink because of the water around them. They sink because of the water that gets in them. So as a result, as a team, we have to keep our stuff together. We have to communicate well. We have to treat each other with respect and dignity. We want to be able to hear each other. We want to be humble, all of those other things. So first thing I do is I set the standard and I express the standard and the expectations. So we're all on the same page. And then the second part is clarity is kindness. And that means really defining roles and responsibilities within the team. And John, I think you hear this too. Well, they should just know. Well, they get paid the money. Like, why am I babysitting and all that? Well, guess what? That's kind of an easy way out. Yeah. Part of the leadership journey is doing things that you may not agree with all the time. And that means doing the roles and responsibilities, the job descriptions. Yeah. But going a little bit further, even talking about what are the parameters around your decision-making for your role? What about your financial kind of boundaries? Who do you need to communicate with? And so you're really clarifying the expectations first, and then roles and responsibilities within that. And then you go into the next step that I do typically, and it's a DDB 131 method. And it's to create the muscle of decision-making within the team. So a lot of times we don't equip the team with the ability to make decisions, right? So what happens, John? They upward delegate. Hey, boss, I got this problem. Blah. You got to fix it. It's like, hold on a second. How does that work? Yeah, well, I don't know what to do. You got to fix it. And then at the end of the day, we're dog ass tired. We can't go to Sally's cheer practice or, my kid's baseball game because I've been dealing with everyone's problems all day. So the 1-3-1 method, it's you come to me with one problem. All right. So within that, John, you need to figure out for me on my behalf, do some due diligence, put some legwork into this thing. What's the impact of it? Why is this even a problem? What's the root cause? And then come to me with 3 options. And here's a little, one of them could be do nothing, frankly, the other 2. And then come to me with your recommendation, John, and have some thought into it. And that does a few different things. One, it relieves me of the cognitive overwhelm to try to navigate this complexity of all of the things. And now going back to the micromanagement piece and the lack of empowerment and all these other things that people feel, involvement equals commitment. So as a result, they've done some legwork into it. They have a contribution into the problem and the solution. And you now work together to figure it out. And you say, hey, you know what, John, that's a great recommendation. You know what, go ahead and do that. So this is what right looks like for us. Then the last part, John, is leading with empathy. And I think one of the areas we typically get wrong in leadership is, our organizational structures are built wrong. We have the manager or the leader up here and everyone supports them. But if you're leading with empathy, going back to empathy, you're flipping that around and you're supporting them. And so they feel empowered, they feel respected, they're able to make decisions more quickly, all of the things by just setting the stage of building that team effectively.
Yeah, no, it's such a great way of doing it, especially when you say to people, well, you're the expert. I hired you as the expert on this. You go and come up with some solutions, and I have opinions, and let's go through, and we can go through and find the best one. I mean, I think that's such a powerful way. One thing you came back to, or you mentioned earlier, and I didn't want to come back to this, was if you think about it, most people get hired into roles, right, where the job description was copy pasted off the internet from some other like role. Maybe a few things changed, but very little attention paid to it. So the person is hired, comes onto the job with a job description that really doesn't reflect the job that they're doing. And nobody ever sits down, defines the role properly, defines the expectations. It's kind of something we learn over time. So your first 6 months generally are a nightmare because you're just trying to figure out what your job actually is. Back to what you said, if you do that work and you really define properly, then your chances of success skyrocket for both you and the employee.
Well, and I think, John, the other part of this piece that leaders struggle with is accountability. How do we hold folks accountable to things? Well, it actually is much easier now that you've had the conversation with them. You've expressed very clearly what the roles, responsibilities are, what the boundaries are, or the communication, what you need to be told, all of those other things. So there are no surprises. And so it's a case of, hey, John, we had this conversation. It was a great conversation. And we had an opportunity to banter back and forth and go from there. You asked some questions, great questions. But at the end of the day, we left there with an understanding. And now here we are doing this. Just help me understand what your thoughts are around that. And so how many times have we been held accountable to a standard that we didn't know we had?
Exactly.
And that's frustrating and that pisses everyone off and no one wants that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that happens more often than people realize, especially when somebody's either a new leader or when they've hired new people. Yeah, there's nothing worse than being held accountable for something you didn't even know you were accountable for.
Absolutely. And now as a leader, so you do this wonderful steps, these steps, Daryl, like he's learned this and he's done it and all that stuff. So I'm just going to follow it cookie cutter. Well, it doesn't absolve you of the responsibility as well. Like this isn't a fire and forget missile. You're still needing to support. You're still needing to hold people accountable to the standard. That's your job to drive the outcomes. But then looping back to how we started this conversation was creating autonomous teams. If I have a bunch of people that are dumping their problems on me, or if I'm managing and monitoring emails, you know what it's like. Hey, just send that to me. I'll just give it a once over
Yeah.
/ rewrite the whole thing.
Yeah.
If I'm doing all of that, then I don't have time to spend with one-on-ones.
Yeah.
Or if I have a group of 5 folks and 4 are doing 1-3-1 and they're what I would deem high performers, well, then I can spend the time with that 5th person to coach, mentor, and you know what, honestly, performance manage if I need to. I don't want to go down that road, but then it just frees me up to do a whole bunch of things. And so it's a way different environment. And so when we talk about retaining or attracting and retaining top talent, it's kind of inherent in that top talent doesn't want to be micromanaged.
No.
They want to be respected, they want to be heard, and they want to be left alone, but not ignored.
But not ignored, and they want to be supported. And yeah, there was that book, I think it's called The 1 Minute Manager. I don't know if you remember that book. I mean, you know, you've got all these monkeys on your back, and your job is to get them off your back and onto other people's back, especially the people you like who report into you. And a lot of the times their role is trying to get the monkey off their back onto yours. So this is what we're talking about here: is if you're constantly inheriting monkeys back, then you have a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And then nobody wins. And again, you're going home now after working long hours. You're not able to sit with your spouse or your partner or your family and be present. And what happens is you fall further behind, you get burned out, you're not sleeping, the list goes on. And then you bring that back into work, and therein lies the cycle. So we don't systematize, we don't set up processes, we don't help ourselves to create autonomous teams in the first place.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we get back, as you said, about, you know, sometimes toxic leadership isn't inherently the fault of the person. It's the fault of the environment, and the fault that they haven't been trained, and the fault that, you know, they get a lot of top-down pressure on them suddenly. And yeah, I mean, people are human, and they're going to act in ways that are very inherently human. If you haven't put the mechanisms in place to support them.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, John, because at least no one starts this way. No one wakes up in the morning, they stretch, and they're like, "Oh man, what's on the agenda? You know what? I'm gonna F stuff up today. That's what I'm gonna do today. I'm gonna miscommunicate, John. I'm going to be obtuse. I'm going to be late all day, and I'm going to be just twirling my pen, if anyone uses pens anymore in the workplace, you know, while the boss is talking." Generally speaking, people don't start there. How do they get there? They get there because they're not seen, they're not heard, they're not involved, they're not respected, and all those other things. And so giving each other the grace and the benefit of the doubt, rather than coming in guns blazing, which is typically the case as well. Like, "Hey, John, you screwed this up. Why?" Well, hold on a second. Maybe there are all sorts of different variables at play or different factors. And maybe, to your point, maybe my boss is under extreme pressure and being micromanaged. And guess what? It flows. It's just,
It does. It does. Yeah. And no, and it is. And to be honest, I mean, you know, when we are stressed, when we're under pressure and stuff, it's very easy to go all guns blazing. You know, I've been guilty of myself. I mean, it's a very easy place. It takes a time, attention, intentionality to avoid that. But also you need to look at it. If you are feeling that way, if you're in a leadership position and you are feeling that way, that, as you said, you know, your days are going to hell, you're stressed all the time, you know, you're at, you know, at war with half of your employees, you know, you're at war with half of the other department heads or whatever. At some stage, you have to take a step back and say, is it me, or is it the organization? Is it the setup, or is it a combination?
Yeah, I agree 100%. And part of my framework, the 3 pillars, it starts with self-mastery. And it's exactly that kind of emotional regulation, that self-awareness. What are my values? How do I handle stress? That's a big part, where we're actually not taught the fundamental elements of dealing with stress, breathing, like breath work and proper sleep and all those things. So I cover that. And then productivity. We don't actually learn how to be productive. It's like kids may not know how to study. Well, how would they know if you never taught them? Right. And then the third pillar of my program and my framework is leading others. And this is what we're talking about here. But at the end of the day, we ourselves don't maybe know all of the strategies that we need to employ just to show up to work and function day to day without dumping all of our issues and challenges on everybody else as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, Daryl, there's been so much in this episode. Thank you so much. All of Daryl's information will be below this video. But before we go, please do remind people about what you do.
Yeah, thank you, John. First of all, again, thank you for the opportunity. So, I help leaders of leaders, particularly in the tech and AI space, really navigate the challenges of high growth and uncertainty in markets and their companies. A lot of times you try the generic leadership training, the cookie cutter frameworks, and scar tissue learning that we talked about, and heck, even Harvard type programs. But man, nothing actually works. So I help those senior leaders master that chaos, build high performance teams without sacrificing their sanity and selling their soul with my framework. And so at the end of the day, they can leave with confidence. They can create the high performing cultures that we talked about, and that inherently attracts and retains top talent. So that's what I'm all about. That's my mission.
Perfect. Well, listen, I would encourage you to go check it out. As I said, all the information will be below the video. So thanks again, Daryl. Thank you for watching and listening.